Okay, everyone who says I only review blockbusters, well, this review is definitely for the opposite of that, so you'd better watch it. So Again is definitely an old-fashioned indie, or it feels like an old-fashioned indie. And I know that that's a loaded term because there's so much discord now about what is and isn't an indie or an independent movie. Is it backed up by money? Is it not backed up by money? I don't know. I don't follow funding stuff or whatever. I'm not sure what the release schedule is for this or who's going to pick it up, who's going to distribute it. I don't know. I'm a film critic. Distribution isn't my job or my profession or something that I really notice or care about for the most part. What I know is that it has the vibe of what I consider an old school indie, which is to say what independent movies were or felt like, let's say, when I was a teenager, which was, let's call it a while ago. It feels like a 90s independent movie. In affectation is what I mean. You know, it's set in the middle of nowhere, it's small, it's self-contained, it's got a very original feeling plot. It's got like 3 major locations, and 2 of those major locations are an RV camper and a record store. Like, the only way that you can really tell that this isn't a 90s movie is that there are queer women in it, and they're the main characters of the story instead of being plot points in someone else's journey of self-discovery. So, hey, that's cool. Speaking of aging myself, I now realize that referring to 90s indie movies as the distant past, I have in fact been a film critic for a quarter century.
It'll happen to you.
And speaking of low-tech aesthetics, gestures to my own surroundings, if you have it in you to support the Movie Bob Patreon or drop some coins into the till, I sure would love to get these here finances back on track. Anyway, on to better news. Again, very good movie, great surprise. As soon as it shows up in your area or is available to watch through your preferred means, I am going to recommend that you check this one out. Currently making its way out to the screener and festival circuits. Basic premise here, gosh, how do we explain this without like giving away the whole game? Basic idea, this is Groundhog Day meets Free Rent, I guess. I'm not sure if that's fully encapsulating it, but I feel like it is, and I also think that if that sounds right to you, you'll probably like this movie. The basic idea here is it's fantastical sci-fi fantasy scenario, but set immediately after what's supposedly the important part of the sci-fi fantasy part of the story. The main character, played by writer and co-director Mia Moore, has been stuck in a one-day repeating time loop for like 10 years. So yeah, that Groundhog Day scenario where you live out a whole day and you go to sleep and then you remember that you lived that whole day, but everyone else resets into the whole day, and you keep doing that over and over again until you learn some sort of important lesson about yourself, like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. Yeah. And where the comparison to, I guess, Free Rent is the only thing I can think of that also does this gimmick. The movie starts up on the day the loop suddenly stops. So after what's supposedly usually the main important part of that story. So this movie starts on the day that the loop stops. So sort of Groundhog Day 2, basically. So yeah, now the loop is over. It's the beginning of this movie. What does our main character and her girlfriend do now? The girlfriend, who she's told about the loop the previous day, now knows about the loop, but okay, what do they do now? Loop over, we can do anything. What is anything? I'm probably explaining this poorly, but I'm also trying to not give away the whole rest of the movie, because literally the whole rest of the movie is, okay, I just got out of a time loop. I've been doing this for 10 years. Now, what do I do? Because most time loop movies are about a character, finding out they're in a time loop, realizing they're effectively immortal, but now they've got to use it to solve a mystery or stop some danger from happening, or using the fact that they've got infinite do-overs to become a hero or a god or a devil or, something. This is about someone who was already feeling stuck and unsure about their life and has kind of still felt that way the whole time they were in the loop. Most movies are about, confident protagonists in general, because, why else would we be watching the movie about them? So they get stuck in a time loop and they immediately eventually figure out, okay, all right, I'm in a time loop, I'm going to use this to be the hero of a movie. This is about a more realistic person who was already feeling kind of washed up and fucked up in their life, and oh, I'm in a time loop. Great, what do I do with this? probably keep screwing up, but now screwing up in a time loop. And so now, in this case, what to do after the loop becomes more like a metaphor for our main character and her girlfriend, for whom, remember, this has still only been one day, wanting to get on with her life, versus a partner, the main character, who has had like a decade to try out a bunch of different versions of life in this shitty town that they had just pulled into in their RV camper, and feels like, wait a minute, I think maybe we might actually be different people. I don't know who I am yet, or who you are, since you've been kind of actually hurtfully non-committal about this relationship in a couple hundred other various versions of the loop. And of course, that a time loop is literalized metaphor for life being a constant state of self-reinvention and understanding, and maybe that's a more potent allegory for the human experience when applied to a main character who also happens to be a transgender woman. So yeah, this is really interesting, different stuff to do with a sci-fi premise that starts out with, all the sci-fi stuff, that happened before the movie started. We're going to flash back to it and show what the results of it was and maybe investigate what caused it a little bit. Like I said, I'm avoiding spoiler stuff here, but this is mostly a character piece about what do you do with someone who is looping versus someone who's not looping, and the looping is mostly a metaphor for indecision versus not so much non-indecision, but two different types of indecision, one socially imposed and one self-imposed. And that is really interesting stuff to dig into using the time loop as a way to literalize it on top of it. At least that was my takeaway from it. Yours may be different, but that's the kind of stuff that this gives you to think about. And that's the old school, lo-fi, sci-fi type of thinking that this can engender, while also being a very strong character piece, because this is mostly a movie about people hanging out for different versions of a day in a kind of crummy but colorful small town and meeting a small, independent movie-sized assortment of supporting characters. It feels exactly the right length, which is interesting because it has the vibe of a short film that's been extended, but extended out to about the right length. A problem that movies of this size, especially back in the authentic early era of indie movies like this, is you would often run into movies that clearly started out as, okay, this is my 30-minute short film that is now my 90-minute feature because of arbitrary feature length. But this feels about exactly the right length. Does it repeat themes a bit? Is the second act a little bit of, okay, we kind of understand this, but we're going to repeat it in a succession of different ways so that we really get the point home? Yeah, but they're good characters, and it's a good time to spend time with them. Moore is a very good central performer, which is good because she's putting a lot on her own shoulders as a main character who has to be sympathetic, even though she's not always making what we would call sympathetic decisions. Like, we can get why the other characters don't respond to her in like the most patient of ways, but also because we understand the concept of the time loop. We get why she's feeling this way, but we can also see the other characters as quote-unquote regular time people, why they might not fully understand it. And that's a difficult balance to work, especially because it's using the time loop as an allegory and metaphor for multiple other things going on with her character. This is really interesting stuff. You also get right in the middle of parts of Act 2 and then again in Act 3 a really strong supporting turn from Abigail Thorne, who, depending on your media diet, you may know as a supporting character from House of the Dragon or as the internet-based documentary filmmaker from Philosophy Tube. Very strong role in this, very good performance, as having seen a lot of time loop movies that are mostly character-based, immediately thought, okay, all right, I've seen time loop movies, I know what this character is here for, but then set up and went, oh no, okay, we're doing something different, cool, this is interesting. She's very, very good in this. Right across the board, all of the actors are good in this. So yeah, that's going to be an 8 out of 10 for Again from me. This is going to be one of the more interesting independent movies to come this year. Keep your eye on it.